those are all some things. So this is about creating communities of learning, and you've already got our intros. So what happens if we don't stop with these basic questions? So we're going to do a little experiment here, and we're going to actually do a, can we do a breakout in the Zoom room also?
Yeah.
How many are on there?
We have 8, well, I'm 2, so 6.
6, okay. So let's do 3 breakout rooms, and just random assigning, but before they go into their breakout room, we're going to experiment is what happens when we don't stop there and we go a little bit deeper into those questions, into maybe some questions that have some more, maybe some more thought behind them. So, but first to think about how many years of experience do we have in this space? So if you want to go ahead and put in Menti, how many years that you, and I'll leave it up to you. If you're like, you know what, from the time I was born, I was gaining experience, you're welcome to put that number in. Or if you're like, you know, my years of experience as an instructor or in the work that I do, this is anonymous, so no one's going to know what you put there, but we'll start to see. And I didn't think about this, that I'm going to have to do some really fast math to think about how many years of experience we have. Okay, I'm going to say about 145 years. That's going to be my rough guesstimate there. Oh, another one pops up. Okay, 155 about. So we have over 155 years of experience in this space. And so let's engage in that. You all have lots of things to contribute. So for the people in this room, I'm going to put up some questions. And for the people on Zoom in your breakout room, you might want to write down what those questions are before you go. And to engage in those questions. For those in the room, go ahead and mix yourselves up. And if you have 3 in a group, that's totally fine. So here we go on what our questions are.
I can broadcast them into the room.
Oh, beautiful.
So I'll type them and broadcast them out into the room.
All right. So as friends are coming back into the Zoom room, I'm curious, what were those things that were easier as a child than they are now? Anyone want to shout them out, put them in the chat? The first thing that came to my mind was cartwheels.
Cartwheels.
And I don't know if I was very good with cartwheels when I was younger, but it seems like they were much easier than they are now. Yes, I've tried recently. It's not pretty recently.
We have online using our imaginations, taking time for myself.
Yeah.
Making friends.
Friends, yeah.
Learning the piano.
I just said doing new things, right? I mean, we just do it as a kid. You wouldn't think about it.
I think about all the technology that my kids learn and how fast, and think I'm pretty good, but I'm slowing down in how fast I can learn things. Yeah, that's great. Is there any others in there?
That's all.
All right, perfect. So we're not going to go through all of these questions, but to just think about like, what was that conversation like when we went beyond kind of our basic level? There we go. So what were some of those things that, like, what was that like for you to be able to engage with people in a different sort of way? Get some head nods.
It was
fun. Maybe refreshing.
Yeah, there are fun questions.
Yes, well, and I need to give credit to these are called We Connect cards. So they're made, it's called We and Me.me. But there's, you can see them too. They are 3 different colors, and we actually did some of the green colors today. There's green, there's blue, and then there's like a purple. And there's lots of different things that you can do with this. So the different colors mean maybe it's a little bit more deeper sharing. But then on the other side too, there's also, I don't know if you can see this, there's a person with some motion. So if maybe in part of a session, it's like, grab a card and do whatever that motion is on that card. If you need, you know, like if people are starting to doze off or whatever, like that's a great thing. There's some armbands, there's all sorts of things. But nobody has to run a marathon. So far, I have not found that card on here, but it's just a really nice way to ask questions. And I've seen some folks always carry these in their backpack. I have someone that actually has them in their car. I've seen students that they get these and they have them in their car, and then it's a great way to connect with people on a different level. Great car trip thing. If you're tired of counting cows on the side of the road, anyone else do that? Cows on my side, okay. But so we and me, and that's where some of those questions came from. But really thinking about when we're creating these communities in the classroom, first we need to create the space. And so to think about like, how do we allow for this time for people to engage with each other? But then also provide direction. So maybe there are some basic things as far as introduce, you know, yourself but maybe there isn't an emphasis on major because we have students who don't always know what their major is going to be. And what we find is those students, especially that come into our office that are undeclared or exploring, there's sometimes some shame that they don't know exactly what they're going to do with their life. And the reality is most of their peers are probably in a similar position. They just have been able to tag it for now. So maybe think about like, what is the direction? What are they going to talk about? And maybe you can give some prompts to talk about things that will get them a little bit deeper beyond that. And for some, home may not be something they want to talk about either. So think about what are different questions that we can ask, but to give the space to do that and to do that right away. And what would happen in our classroom environments if we allow for those communities to be built? And even in a room of 200 to 300 students. And I know sometimes our concern is like, oh, what if they're not answering the questions I want them to have to answer? I'd rather that they're engaging with each other instead of on their phones. And I think that is something that we're seeing is like just giving people the space to engage and direction to do that. And then also, I say to engage, but then also step out of the way. And so like give those instructions and let them do that and empower them on how they can use these relationships throughout the course of the semester, whether that's to set up some studying or, you know, maybe you might miss class until that's that person that can be your connection point. Or my buddy is Mark, and all of a sudden Mark realizes I'm in the class the whole week. And Mark reaches out to me and says, hey, I haven't seen you in class. It kind of relieves some things from a faculty member too, to know that when we create community, it's not solely on the faculty member to engage with students. And sometimes that peer-to-peer means so much more. So to engage in it, be okay answering some of the silly questions too, but then also to get out of the way for the students to be able to do that. So to think about how do we connect before we add content? Because if they know this is a space where we can connect with each other, that also means that we can start to learn together. And then to think about like how can co-creating class expectations happen? Oftentimes when this is put together, like students can see that they have value, like instructors value their input in it, the power of collaboration. And so to know, like, maybe I'm thinking about just this one or two things as far as expectations, but when we come together, there's so much more with that. And then your understanding of expectations. I can't even tell you how many times in the last 2 years, the conversation about why things aren't happening. And, you know, initially, sometimes the conversation is about accountability, but then if we back up, peel another layer off, it's like, well, there were no expectations put out there in the first place. So how do we, you know, how do we really start? And it seems basic, but how do we start there to start to build it? And some things, you know, these are all different ways to think about how can you co-create expectations. unfortunately got covered up, but on the far left here, as you're looking at it, the 2 different color Post-it notes, it actually says your job, my job. And so it's also to even say like, this is what you can expect of me, and this is what I'm going to expect of you. That's one of the ways that you can do it. Lots of Post-it notes, and just having people write them out and then bump them together, see where there's commonalities and how that can develop. You can also do some word clouds and just throw out some different words for them to reflect on. So peer-to-peer things, and then just helping them understand too, who are all these people that are going to help support them in this process with these expectations. But to spend the time to do that, so there's no question. And oftentimes I think we assume that the syllabus has all the expectations in there and it's really clear and everyone read the syllabus. Many times I'll hear like, they just read the syllabus. Well, let's give them some reasons to read it. So actually I had an instructor that was like, it was like a scavenger hunt of the syllabus. And one of the things was find a typo. And I was like, well, that's a cool way to relieve yourself from having typos. You know, we've all been there. We're like, okay, this is perfect. And you go and, you know, when we used to print it or we post it and it's like, I see it, you know, and then it's glaring at you. Well, have your students find it, you know, turn it into a game. It also is encouraging them to make sure that they're going through that syllabus. So kind of back to Menti here, you can go ahead and enter in, what is one way that you would create connection before content in your class? These are great suggestions, and yeah, it doesn't need to take a whole lot of time. And for some, I know some people, like in large classrooms, the concern is about, you know, how do I keep track who is there and who's not? Even maybe some of those classes are actually a quiz in Blackboard, and you know, it can kind of populate who is there. That's one of the concerns, or just be able to say, even for that outreach, to say from the instructor, I've noticed that you haven't been here. What's going on? If it can't happen peer, can it happen for the faculty? The marshmallow challenge. I like what it's teaching them though. Practice, trial and error, and keep going, right? I think it's the one where the spaghetti noodles and you have marshmallows and spaghetti noodles and you have to build the tallest structure with your marshmallows being the joints, I guess, or the, so.
Yeah, it's the tallest one.
Okay.
And I do it a second time, like midway through the semester, and get the thin spaghetti noodles the second time around, just to challenge them a little bit more. Switch it up. They'll think it's the same thing, and they'll go, "What is going on?" So, love that. The nameplates for the tables or the wall. I mean, just knowing someone's name can, and I think we all get to that place of like, I should remember your name and I don't. And so those wall plates really help with that. Great ideas. Some other things, it sounds like this morning it was talked about Flipgrid in the main session. So this is a tool that like an instructor can say, you know, send out a question ultimately in the Flipgrid and then people respond to it in video. And then students can respond to each other in video or text actually. But you can limit the response times. So I've seen like 60 or 90 seconds, and it's amazing how much engagement can come from that. Also be careful, depending on how many students are in that section or in that class. You know, if there's 300 students, the expectation that they're all viewing each other's is probably pretty enormous to do, but maybe there can be smaller groups that create cohorts within Flipgrid. Google Jamboard, so this is like virtual Post-it notes options. We were going to do it today and it was requiring a login, so we were trying to minimize some of the tools there, but happy to work people through that. Nearpod is something that our K through 12 do a lot, but it's similar as far as students can respond to it. It actually does integrate with Blackboard though, and so you can put the question out in Blackboard and sync it appropriately. And again, another way to see like who is here and responding to these things. So that's a new tool as well. So I think just ultimately, there's lots of different things we can do, but first we have to start with the intention and to design it in that way. And so, and to know that just a few minutes can make a world of difference in what that community is in your classroom. So we're gonna flip gears really fast here over into our new student success platform that will be launching a little bit later this summer. So my apologies for those of you that are not here at NDSU, but our understanding is maybe some other institutions will be signing on to this platform in the next year or so. So I'll turn it to Andrea.
Yeah, sorry, the screenshot is really small, but this is just a really quick preview of our Civitas Inspire platform that our academic advisors will use and our faculty. So at other institutions, you might have something similar to this as well, but it's a nice kind of one-stop shop where you can get a lot of student information quickly, often in dashboard view. So you're not hunting and looking around on different screens on campus connection and everything. So as an advisor, when you log in, this is what that homepage is going to look like. This one's a little bit more extreme. It's kind of more from an institutional level. So as an advisor, it would be pared down to kind of your advising caseload, but you can quickly see different insights about your students. So this is really helpful when an advisor has, you know, maybe 250 students and they're just looking to start to get to know them. So when I have, at the start of every semester, I challenge my academic advisors to just block off an hour of time, grab a coffee, grab a full glass of water, and sit down and just look at each of their students' profiles and kind of see what they can get to know on paper. So then when the student comes in, they maybe have some of that out of the way already. You can definitely see things like students' hometowns, so you can break the ice in that way if you know of that town or know of that state if they're from far away. But then you'll also have notes in there that you can review from previous interactions to kind of start where you left off last time. But there's also some really interesting things that will hopefully bring your attention to some students that are maybe disengaged with the institution. And so our new platform is going to actually sync with Blackboard. And so we'll be able to see if students haven't been logging into Blackboard. And so maybe if it is that large lecture and you can't tell attendance visually who's not been there, this will be a good indicator of maybe who's also not logging in online and doing some outreach that way. And we'll have texting capabilities, messaging. And so here is some other data insights that you could have on your student advisees too. So quickly seeing students that have a hold on their account. Of course, during enrollment time, a lot of that will be the financial hold. So, you know, this will maybe be more fruitful at other times during the semester to know who has a hold on their account. But then there's that low course engagement. And then students who recently withdrew from a course. So that might be something that working with your advisees, you didn't know unless you came across that on their transcript. And this will actually bring your attention then to that. And then as enrollment happens, a quick view of who hasn't enrolled yet for the upcoming term. So doing some outreach in that way. And then as a faculty member, this is really small, sorry, but this is a way that you can raise concerns about a student. So if they're not engaging in the class, they're not really taking you up on those connections and everything that you've been trying to build in the classroom, you can raise an alert on your students. And it would actually go to the advisor, and you can give the advisor recommendations as to what you think would be a helpful next step. So you can actually suggest that the advisor should set up a meeting, or they don't really need to take action, but here's what's going on. So different things that you think the student should do, potentially meet with you during your office hours. You could write in those office hours, you know, seek out tutoring. maybe consider withdrawing from the class, you can make those recommendations right there, so that the advisor can connect with the student. And then, kind of one of my last slides here is then as the instructor, potentially then for chemistry, for example, you can see your class list. So going in there, kind of getting to know who's in your class and everything. But you can see what all their grades are. Thinking over again from Blackboard, and then you can see how many days that your student has actually been logging in and what the average from the class login is, and kind of see how different students compare and who might need some outreach to get them back engaged in the class before a withdrawal is maybe necessary. So that's just kind of a really quick preview of some kind of sample screenshots. These aren't NDSU data quite yet, but coming soon. So yeah.
I think our last thing, fast and furious, is just if you have any questions, you can put them in the app, or you can also just raise your hand or feedback. Happy to take any of that. Otherwise, I think we are in the way of lunch. So thank you so much for engaging, and hopefully you got a few tips of how you can start to create more community in your classrooms.